Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The Sunday morning sun filtered through the oak trees as Nate Whitmore worked on his classic '67 Mustang. At 34, years of working with cars had sculpted his body into something hard and efficient, like the machines he fixed. "Daddy, look what I found." Nate glanced up, his stern features softening as Hazel came bounding across the lawn, her dark pigtails bouncing. She clutched something in her small hands, face alight with childish wonder. "What you got there, pumpkin?" He wiped his hands on a rag and crouched to her level. Hazel opened her palms to reveal a blue jay feather. "It's pretty. Can I keep it?" "Sure thing." Nate tucked the feather carefully behind her ear. "Looks good on you." "Nate." "Hazel. Lemonade's ready." Brielle's voice rang from the porch. She stood there in a simple sundress, her honey blonde hair catching the light. To anyone watching, they were the picture of suburban bliss, the hard-working husband, the doting wife, the cherubic daughter. Nate watched his wife as she set the picture down. Something in his gut tightened the mechanic's instinct that could hear a problem in an engine before any diagnostic test could find it. Just a flicker there and gone. "Coming, Mommy," Hazel called, racing toward the porch. Nate followed more slowly, closing the Mustang's hood. He bought the car as a wreck 3 years ago, rebuilding it piece by piece. His business, Whitmore Auto Repair, had started small, but now employed 3 full-time mechanics beside himself. "You've been at it since dawn," Brielle said, handing him a glass of lemonade. Her smile was perfect, practiced Miss Junior Charleston 8 years running before they'd met. "Almost got her purring right," Nate answered, taking a long drink. The lemonade was too sweet, the way Brielle always made it. They sat on the porch, watching Hazel as she chased butterflies across the small yard of their Charleston suburb home. "I was thinking," Brielle said, her voice casual, "maybe we could take Hazel camping next weekend? Just up to Lake Moultrie." Nate nodded. "Could do. Been a while since we got out of the city. I could pack your favorite sandwiches." She placed her hand on his knee, perfectly manicured nails against his worn jeans. Hazel's been asking to go. The day unwound slowly, comfortably. Nate grilled burgers for dinner, while Brielle prepared a salad, and Hazel set the table, standing on a stool to reach. After dinner, they watched a Disney movie. Hazel nestled between them on the couch, her small body warm against Nate's side. When she finally dozed off, Nate carried her upstairs to bed, tucking her favorite stuffed rabbit beside her. "Sleep tight, pumpkin," he whispered, pressing a kiss to her forehead. He lingered in the doorway, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. A protective instinct surged through him, the knowledge that he would do anything to keep her safe. Later, as Brielle showered, Nate checked the locks on the doors and windows, a ritual he'd performed every night since Hazel was born. He couldn't have known that in less than 24 hours, his trust would be shattered beyond repair. Nate woke to screaming that he bolted upright, instantly alert. The digital clock read 2:17 a.m. "Daddy, Mommy, it hurts." Hazel's cries cut through him like a blade. He was out of bed and running down the hall before his feet touched the floor, Brielle a step behind him. Hazel sat in her small bed, face contorted in pain, scratching desperately at her arms and neck. Even in the dim glow of her nightlight, Nate could see the angry red welts spreading across her skin. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, rushing to her side. "Hazel, honey, what happened?" "It itches. It burns," Hazel wailed, her fingernails leaving white streaks across the inflamed skin. "Stop scratching, baby," Brielle said, her voice tight with panic. She grabbed Hazel's hands. "You'll make it worse." Nate leaned closer, examining the rash. It wasn't like anything he'd seen before, not poison ivy or chickenpox. The welts were raised, angry, spreading before his eyes. And then he noticed something else. Hazel's breathing had changed, coming in short, wheezing gasps. "She can't breathe right," he said, the first tendrils of real fear gripping his chest. "Get her shoes. We're going to the hospital. Now." Brielle hesitated. "Maybe we should call first." "Now, Brielle." The command left no room for debate. Nate scooped Hazel into his arms, her small body burning against his chest. She wheezed against his shoulder, each breath a struggle. "It's okay, Pumpkin," he murmured, trying to keep the terror from his voice. "Daddy's got you. We're going to get help." Minutes later, they were in Nate's truck, Hazel wrapped in a blanket on Brielle's lap. Nate drove with single-minded focus, blowing through red lights on empty streets. Every labored breath from the passenger seat tightened the vice around his heart. "She's getting worse," Brielle said, her voice cracking. "Nate, her lips are turning blue." Something primal roared inside him. Not his little girl. Not Hazel. County Memorial's emergency entrance loomed ahead. Nate jerked the wheel, the truck's tires squealing as he pulled up directly to the ambulance bay doors. He was out in an instant, yanking open Brielle's door, taking Hazel from her arms. "My daughter can't breathe," he shouted as he burst through the doors, Hazel limp in his arms. "Someone help us." The next few minutes blurred into a chaos of scrubs and stretchers. Nate paced the small curtained area where they waited, his eyes never leaving Hazel as nurses attached monitors and oxygen, but a tall man with salt and pepper hair and a white coat entered. "I'm Dr. Vincent Rourke, attending physician," he said, moving directly to Hazel's bedside. "Let's see what we have here." Nate watched as the doctor examined Hazel. "Has she had allergic reactions before?" "No," Nate said. "Nothing like this." Dr. Rourke looked up, his eyes moving from Nate to Brielle. Something changed in his expression, so subtle Nate almost missed it. A hardening around the eyes, a tightening of the jaw. "Mrs. Whitmore," Dr. Rourke said, his tone noticeably cooler. "We've met before, I believe." Brielle blinked. "Have we? I don't recall. I never forget a face," Dr. Rourke said. He turned back to Hazel. "She's having a severe allergic reaction. We need to administer epinephrine immediately and run some tests." As the doctor worked, Nate couldn't shake the feeling that something important had just happened. He moved to Hazel's side, taking her small hand in his. Her breathing was already easier with the oxygen, but the rash remained angry and red. "You're going to be okay, Pumpkin," he promised. "Daddy's here." Over Hazel's bed, Nate's eyes met Dr. Rourke's. In that brief moment, something passed between them, a warning, unspoken but clear. Every protective instinct in Nate's body went on high alert. Morning light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting stripes across Hazel's sleeping form. The epinephrine had worked quickly. Her breathing had stabilized, and the angry rash had begun to fade. Nate hadn't left her side all night, dozing in the uncomfortable visitor's chair while Brielle went home to gather clean clothes and Hazel's favorite toy. Doctor Rourke entered with a tablet in hand, checking Hazel's vitals. "How is she?" Nate asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. "Much better. The antihistamines are doing their job. We'll need to keep her for observation today, possibly overnight." Nate nodded, relief washing through him. "Do you know what caused it?" Dr. Rourke glanced at the door before answering. "We're running tests." "Has your daughter been tested for allergies before?" "No, she's never needed it." "Mr. Whitmore, could you help me get your daughter changed into a hospital gown?" The nurses left one earlier. "Sure." Nate stood, moving to the small cabinet where hospital supplies were stored. He reached for the folded gown. Dr. Rourke stepped too close for casual conversation. With a subtle movement, he pressed a folded piece of paper into Nate's hand. "Check her for unusual bruising while you change her," he said loudly, then added in a whisper, "Read this alone." Nate's heart pounded as he slipped the note into his pocket. Together, they changed Hazel into the hospital gown, Nate carefully checking her arms and legs as instructed. There were no bruises, but he couldn't shake the cold feeling spreading through his gut. "I don't see anything unusual," he reported. "Good." Dr. Rourke made another note. "A nurse will be in shortly to collect blood samples. If you need anything, press the call button." When Brielle arrived, her hair perfectly styled despite the early hour, Hazel brightened. "Mommy, there's my brave girl," Brielle said, setting a pink backpack on the bed. "Look what I brought you, Mr. Flopsy, and your favorite pajamas." Nate watched as Brielle fussed over Hazel. Everything about her seemed normal, concerned, attentive. Yet something in Dr. Rourke's manner had planted a seed of doubt. "I'm going to grab some coffee," he said, standing. "Want anything?" In the hallway, he walked until he found an empty waiting area, then slipped into it, finally pulling the folded note from his pocket. His hands were steady as he opened it, but his pulse hammered in his throat. The handwriting was neat, precise. Your wife is hurting your child. Meet me privately tonight. Nate read the words 3 times, his mind refusing to process them. A mistake. Had to be. Brielle would never hurt Hazel, she adored her. But as he stood there, memories surfaced. Hazel's unexplained bruises last month that Brielle had attributed to a fall at the playground. The time she'd been sick after a day alone with Brielle, vomiting violently with no apparent cause. Brielle's increasing secretiveness, the late-night phone calls. His mechanic's instinct, the ability to sense when something wasn't right, screamed at him now. He'd ignored the warning signs, the small discrepancies. If there was any truth to this accusation, he would find out. And God help Brielle if she had laid a finger on their daughter. Night had fallen by the time Hazel finally dozed off, exhausted from the day's tests and examinations. The hospital had grown quiet, the daytime bustle replaced by the soft footfalls of the night staff. Brielle yawned, stretching in the visitor's chair. You should go home, get some real sleep. I can stay with her tonight. The suggestion sent a chill down Nate's spine. After the note, the thought of leaving Hazel alone with Brielle made his skin crawl. I'm fine, he said, keeping his voice neutral. Why don't you go? You've got that new shipment coming to the boutique tomorrow, right? After Brielle left, kissing Hazel's forehead and squeezing Nate's shoulder, he sat in tense silence, watching the minutes tick by. At 11:30, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Service entrance, 15 minutes. Dr. R. The service entrance was at the rear of the hospital, dimly lit and used primarily by staff. Nate found Dr. Rourke waiting beside a loading dock, a cigarette between his fingers, though it didn't appear to have been lit. Mr. Whitmore. The doctor nodded, pocketing the unused cigarette. Thank you for coming. Cut the crap, Nate said, his voice low and hard. What the hell was that note about? Dr. Rourke's face remained impassive. Let's walk. When they were out of earshot, Dr. Rourke stopped. I apologize for the dramatic approach, but this isn't something I could discuss openly. Patient confidentiality has limits, but accusations require evidence. What accusations? Nate demanded, though a part of him already knew. I believe your daughter is suffering from Munchausen by proxy syndrome, or more accurately, your wife is. The term meant nothing to Nate. What are you talking about? It's a form of child abuse where a caregiver, usually a mother, deliberately makes a child ill to gain attention or sympathy. The symptoms Hazel presented with were consistent with an induced allergic reaction. Nate's jaw clenched. That's a hell of an accusation, doctor. I know, and I wouldn't make it lightly. But your wife, I've seen her before. She said she didn't know you. She lied. The words were flat, certain. 8 years ago, I worked at a hospital in Georgia. Brielle Jensen was investigated for suspected child neglect involving her younger sister. The case was dismissed insufficient evidence, and her uncle was well-connected. The name hit Nate hard. Jensen, Brielle's maiden name. She told him she was from Florida, an only child. You're saying my wife has been lying to me? That she's hurting our daughter? I'm saying it's a possibility you need to consider. The test we ran today revealed traces of latex in Hazel's bloodstream. She has a severe latex allergy, which I suspect your wife knows. Jesus. Nate turned away, his mind racing. How would she even? It could be anything: latex gloves, crushed into food, residue on toys, even exposure to balloons. The methods vary, but the pattern is the same. Dr. Rourke stepped closer. Mr. Whitmore, you need to understand you're sleeping beside a loaded gun. The phrase sent ice through Nate's veins. He thought of Hazel, so small and vulnerable in that hospital bed. What do I do? The question came out raw, pained. Be watchful. Document everything. If you see suspicious behavior, report it, but understand that these cases are notoriously difficult to prove. Dr. Rourke's expression softened slightly. I'll keep Hazel here as long as medically justifiable. Run every test I can. But eventually, she'll need to go home. Nate nodded, his mind already working ahead. He'd need evidence, irrefutable proof, and he'd need help. Thank you, he said finally, extending his hand to the doctor. "For looking out for my girl." Dr. Rourke shook it firmly. "I couldn't save her sister. Maybe I can save her." As Nate walked back to Hazel's room, each step felt heavier than the last. The world he'd known, the family he believed in, was crumbling beneath his feet. But from the ruins, something else was emerging, a cold, implacable resolve. If Brielle was hurting Hazel, there would be no forgiveness. No mercy, only justice, delivered with the same ruthlessness she'd shown their innocent daughter. Nate sat in the dimness of Hazel's hospital room, the rhythmic beeping of monitors the only sound besides her soft breathing. His mind churned, sifting through memories with new, suspicious eyes. 3 months ago, Hazel had developed strange bruises along her arms and back. Brielle had been the one to notice them, calling Nate at work in a panic. "She must have fallen at the playground," Brielle had explained. "You know how she climbs everything." Nate had accepted the explanation without question. Kids got bruises. It happened. But there had been other incidents, a sudden fever that appeared overnight and vanished just as quickly after a dramatic emergency room visit. Food poisoning that affected only Hazel, despite the whole family eating the same meal. And then there were the changes in Brielle herself. The late-night phone calls she took in the bathroom, voice hushed. The new gym membership, though she'd always hated exercise. The vague explanations for extra hours at work, despite her paycheck never reflecting overtime. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. A text from Brielle. "How's our girl? Should I bring breakfast in the morning?" Nate stared at the message, at the casual "our girl," and felt something harden inside him. If Dr. Rourke was right, if Brielle had deliberately made Hazel sick, she saw their daughter as nothing more than a tool for attention, that she's sleeping. "Doc says she's improving. Don't worry about breakfast. Cafeteria's fine," that he needed to keep Brielle at a distance while he figured out his next move. His mind turned to Declan Reyes, his oldest friend. They'd grown up together in the rougher part of Charleston, fighting side by side when necessary, watching each other's backs always. Declan had leveraged a talent with computers into a legitimate security business, but Nate knew he still had connections and skills that operated in gray areas. "You up?" Nate texted him. The response came seconds later. "For you? Always. What's up?" "Need to talk. It's about Hazel. And Brielle. Sounds serious. I could be at Memorial in 20 that not here. Too many ears. Tomorrow, my shop, 7 a.m. I'll bring coffee. Hang tight, brother." A soft whimper from the bed drew his attention. Hazel was stirring, her small face scrunched in discomfort. "Daddy." Her voice was a thread in the darkness. "I'm here, pumpkin." Nate moved to her side, taking her small hand. "What's wrong?" "My arm itches." "Try not to scratch, baby. It'll make it worse." "When can we go home?" The question sent a pang through him. Home, where she should be safest, might be the very place putting her in danger. "Soon," he promised, smoothing her hair. "The doctors just want to make sure you're all better first." As Hazel drifted back to sleep, Nate returned to his chair, his resolve crystallizing into something cold and unyielding. If Brielle was guilty, if she'd been systematically hurting their daughter, there would be consequences. Nate Whitmore had grown up fighting for everything he had. He'd built his business from nothing, protected what was his with fierce determination. That same ruthlessness would now be turned toward a single purpose: protecting Hazel, and no matter the cost. Dawn broke gray and drizzly as Nate unlocked the side door to Whitmore Auto Repair. He'd left the hospital at 5, after extracting a promise from Dr. Rourke to call immediately if Hazel's condition changed. Brielle was heading to the hospital at 8, giving Nate a narrow window to meet with Declan. Exactly 7. The door opened, and Declan Reyes stepped in, 2 coffee cups in hand and a laptop bag slung over his shoulder. At 35, Declan had the lean build of someone who spent more time behind computers than in gyms, but the military precision in his movements betrayed his 4 years in the Army before starting his security company. "You look like hell," Declan observed, handing Nate a coffee. "Feel worse." Nate took a grateful sip. "Thanks for coming." "Since when do I need thanks?" Declan set his bag on the workbench. "What's going on? Your text had me worried." Nate leaned against a tool cabinet, struggling to frame the unthinkable in words. Hazel's in the hospital. Allergic reaction. Shit, man. She okay? Getting there. Nate's knuckles whitened around the coffee cup. But the doctor pulled me aside. Said he thinks Brielle caused it. Declan went very still. Come again. He recognized her from a hospital in Georgia years ago. Said she was investigated for hurting her sister, something I never knew about because apparently she doesn't have a sister. It's called Munchausen by proxy. Parents who make their kids sick for attention. Jesus Christ. Declan ran a hand over his short-cropped hair. You believe him? Nate set down his coffee, the cup hitting the workbench with a sharp click. I don't want to, but things haven't been right lately. Brielle's been acting strange, secretive phone calls, unexplained absences. And Hazel's had these random health issues that come and go. Declan's eyes, sharp and assessing, studied Nate's face. What do you need from me? Surveillance, Nate said without hesitation. I need to know what she's doing when I'm not around. I need proof either that she's innocent or that she's hurting our daughter. You want me to spy on your wife? I want you to help me protect my daughter. Can you do it or not? Declan's expression settled into something grim and determined. For Hazel? Anything. But you need to understand what you're asking. If I find something, if it turns out Brielle is doing this, there's no going back. I know. Nate's jaw tightened. If she's hurting Hazel, I don't want to weigh back. All right. Declan opened his laptop. Here's what I can do. Hidden cameras in the main areas of your house, living room, kitchen, Hazel's room. Nothing in the bathrooms or your bedroom. I can also set up monitoring on Brielle's phone if you can get me access for about 10 minutes. She leaves it charging by her bedside every night. Password's Hazel's birthday 0417. Simple enough. When can I install the equipment? Tomorrow. I'll make sure Brielle's out of the house. Nate checked his watch. I need to get back to the hospital before she arrives. I can't leave Hazel alone with her. You think she'd try something at the hospital? Nate's expression darkened. I'm not taking chances. Not with my daughter's life. Declan stood, placing a hand on Nate's shoulder. We'll figure this out. If Brielle's innocent, great. But if not, he didn't finish the thought. If not, Nate said quietly, she'll regret the day she ever touched a hair on Hazel's head. One more thing, Declan added as they headed for the door. You should talk to Sheriff Vance. If this goes south, you'll want law enforcement on your side from the beginning. Vance? Why him specifically? He had some run-ins with the Jensen family years back. Might be useful to know what he knows. Another piece of Brielle's hidden past. How many more were there? I'll reach out, Nate agreed. Thanks, December. Don't thank me yet. Declan's expression was solemn. This is just the beginning. As Nate drove back to the hospital, rain beating against the windshield, he felt as though he were heading into a storm, one that had been brewing for years without his knowledge. But storms could be weathered if you were prepared. And Nate intended to be very prepared indeed. 2 days later, Hazel was released from the hospital with a prescription for antihistamines and strict instructions to avoid latex. Dr. Rourke had pulled Nate aside one last time, his voice low and urgent. Keep a close eye on her. Document anything suspicious. And keep my number on speed dial. Nate had nodded, the weight of vigilance settling heavily on his shoulders. I will. Now, watching Brielle move around their kitchen preparing dinner while Hazel colored at the table, Nate fought to maintain a neutral expression. Declan had installed cameras the previous day, tiny, nearly invisible devices tucked into smoke detectors, light fixtures, and even Hazel's favorite teddy bear. His phone buzzed with a text from Declan. Initial setup complete. Monitoring active. Call when you could talk. I need to check on a customer's car, Nate said, standing. Won't be long. Outside in his own truck, Nate called Declan. Everything's live, Declan said without preamble. Cameras are recording to secure cloud storage that only you and I can access. I've also got a tracker on Brielle's phone and cloned her text messages. And? Nate pressed, needing to know but dreading the answer. Too early to say anything definitive. But she's been texting someone named Asher a lot. Nothing overtly suspicious, just frequent check-ins, some flirty stuff. Nate's grip tightened on the phone. Asher who? Working on it. Based on context, probably a gym trainer. Lots of references to workouts, protein shakes. The gym membership that had seemed so out of character. Another piece fitting into a disturbing puzzle. I need you to run a background check on Brielle's family, Nate said. Particularly her uncle, the one Dr. Rourke mentioned who helped her dodge the investigation in Georgia. Already on it. And I've scheduled a meeting with Sheriff Vance for tomorrow morning. He was interested when I mentioned the Jensen name. Good. Nate stared at his darkened house, at the warm light spilling from the kitchen window. Keep digging. I'll check in tomorrow. That night, after Hazel was asleep, Nate sat in the living room with his laptop, ostensibly catching up on work emails. In reality, he was watching the live feed from the camera in Hazel's room, monitoring his daughter's peaceful sleep while Brielle showered, but movement caught his eye. Brielle entering Hazel's room in her bathrobe, hair wrapped in a towel. Nate tensed, watching intently as she adjusted Hazel's covers, smoothed her hair back from her forehead, and pressed a kiss to her cheek before leaving. A normal, motherly action that left Nate confused and frustrated. If she was capable of hurting Hazel, how could she also show such genuine affection? Unless it wasn't genuine. Unless everything was an act. Sheriff Colton Vance's office smelled of coffee and gun oil, the walls decorated with commendations and family photos. At 48, Vance had the weathered look of a man who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer but hadn't lost his fundamental decency in the process. Appreciate you making time, Sheriff, Nate said, settling into the chair across from Vance's cluttered desk. Any friend of Declan's gets my attention. Vance leaned back, shrewd eyes assessing Nate. He mentioned this concerns the Jensen family. My wife's maiden name is Jensen. Brielle Jensen. Something hardened in Vance's expression. Calvin Jensen's niece? I don't know, Nate admitted. She never talks about her family. Said they had a falling out before we met. Vance reached for a file drawer, pulling out a thick folder. Calvin Jensen was one of the slipperiest pieces of work I ever encountered. Real estate developer, political connections, rumors of money laundering. Nothing we could ever make stick. He opened the folder, flipping through pages. Had a niece who was always in the background at functions. Pretty blonde thing, around 20 at the time. He slid a newspaper clipping across the desk. It showed a younger version of Brielle, standing beside a silver-haired man at some charity gala. That's her. Nate confirmed, his mouth dry. What's your concern here exactly? Vance asked, his tone careful. Nate outlined the situation: Hazel's mysterious illness, Dr. Rourke's suspicions, the discoveries about Brielle's past. With each detail, Vance's expression grew grimmer. Munchausen cases are notoriously difficult to prove, the sheriff said when Nate finished. And if Calvin Jensen is backing her, you'll face an uphill battle in court. I don't care how difficult it is, Nate said, his voice low and hard. If she's hurting my daughter, I'll do whatever it takes to stop her and make her pay. Vance studied him for a long moment. Declan mentioned surveillance. You got anything concrete yet? Not yet, but we're watching. Keep doing what you're doing. Document everything. And Nate. Vance leaned forward, his voice dropping. Be careful. If your wife suspects, and if she's really planning what this suggests, you and your daughter could be in danger. Back in his truck, Nate called Declan. I met with Vance. He's on board, but we need more evidence. You're in luck, Declan replied. I've been monitoring their text exchanges all morning. Brielle's planning something she's calling a camping trip next weekend. Just her and Hazel. Nate's blood ran cold. What about me? She's going to tell you she booked it as a mother-daughter thing. Special time together. Like hell, Nate growled. This could be our chance, Declan said carefully. If she's planning something, this might be when she does it. We could set up surveillance, catch her in the act. The thought of using Hazel as bait made Nate physically ill. No way. I'm not risking Hazel's safety. What if we had people watching? You, me, maybe one of Vance's deputies he trusts? We'd never let anything actually happen to Hazel. Nate gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles whitened. Let me think about it. And keep monitoring those texts. Will do. Oh, and Nate, the cameras caught something this morning after you left. Brielle went into Hazel's room with what looked like a pair of latex gloves. She was wearing them while handling Hazel's toothbrush. Fury blazed through Nate, white-hot and consuming. Send me the footage. Already did. It's in your secure email. Nate checked the time. Brielle would be at work for another 3 hours, and Hazel was at kindergarten. He needed to see this footage, needed to know exactly what he was dealing with. Inside, he opened his laptop with shaking hands, logging into the secure server Declan had set up. The footage was there, time-stamped from that morning. Nate watched as Brielle entered Hazel's bathroom, a latex glove on one hand. She carefully ran it over Hazel's toothbrush, then replaced the brush in its holder. Her expression was disturbingly blank, clinical almost, as if she were performing a routine task, rather than potentially poisoning her own child. Rage like nothing Nate had ever experienced surged through him. He slammed the laptop closed, breathing hard through clenched teeth. Every protective instinct screamed at him to confront her, to demand answers, to make her pay immediately for what she'd done. But Vance's warning echoed in his mind. Don't confront her. Not yet. These situations can escalate quickly. His phone rang, the screen showing Hazel's school. Nate's heart lurched as he answered. Mr. Whitmore? This is Mrs. Davis from Oak Ridge Elementary. Hazel's developed a rash on her face and hands. She says her toothbrush tasted funny this morning. Given her medical history, we thought it best to call you directly. I'll be right there, Nate said, already grabbing his keys. Don't let anyone else pick her up, especially not her mother. 20 minutes later, Nate held Hazel in the back room of his auto shop, her small face blotchy with an angry rash, but her breathing, thank God, still normal. He'd given her the antihistamine Dr. Rourke had prescribed, and the medicine was working. The toothbrush tasted yucky, Hazel said, leaning against his chest. Like balloons. Latex, just as he'd seen in the footage. I know, pumpkin. Nate smoothed her hair, forcing his voice to remain calm despite the rage boiling inside him. You won't have to use that toothbrush again. I promise. His phone buzzed with a text from Declan. Got new messages. She's talking to Langley about getting the girl out of the way and cashing in. Explicitly mentions the insurance policy. Nate froze. Insurance policy? What insurance policy? He texted back one-handed, the other arm still cradling Hazel. What insurance policy? Declan's response came quickly. Life insurance. $2 million on Hazel. Taken out 3 months ago. Brielle is sole beneficiary. Cold fury washed over Nate, so intense he had to grip his chair to steady himself. Life insurance on a healthy 5-year-old. The implications were too horrific to contemplate. That there's more, Declan added. Asher equals Asher Langley. Trainer at Flex Gym. Has record for prescription fraud and assault. Been seeing Brielle for at least 6 months based on text, an affair. While that would have been painful enough on its own, it paled in comparison to the life insurance revelation. This wasn't just about hurting Hazel for attention. This was potentially something far more sinister. Keep monitoring, Nate replied. I'm taking Hazel to the hospital, then the station. Have Vance ready. Doctor. Rourke's face darkened as he examined Hazel's rash in a private examination room at County Memorial. Definitely another latex exposure, he confirmed, his voice tight with controlled anger. You said her toothbrush? Nate nodded, keeping his voice low so Hazel, who was distracted by a coloring book, wouldn't hear. I have video of Brielle contaminating it this morning. Dr. Rourke's eyebrows rose. You have actual evidence? Cameras, Nate said simply. After what you told me, I had Declan install them. That's proactive. It's my daughter's life. Nate replied, no apology in his tone. Can you document this incident officially? We're going to Sheriff Vance after this. I've already started the paperwork. Dr. Rourke's expression softened as he looked at Hazel. She's lucky to have you, Mr. Whitmore. Many of these cases go undetected until it's too late. The word sent a chill through Nate. Too late. He couldn't allow himself to think about what might have happened if Dr. Rourke hadn't recognized Brielle, if the doctor hadn't warned him. What happens now? Nate asked. Medically, I mean. I'll keep her for observation for a few hours. Make sure the reaction doesn't worsen. The antihistamine you gave her was the right call. Dr. Rourke made notes in Hazel's chart. Has your wife tried to contact you? Multiple times. I told her Hazel was having a daddy-daughter day and turned my phone off. The lie had come easily, but Nate knew it wouldn't hold for long. Good. Keep it that way for now. Dr. Rourke glanced at his watch. I'll have the nurse bring Hazel a snack, and I'll complete the medical documentation. You should call Sheriff Vance. Let him know where we stand. Nate stepped into the hallway, keeping the door open so he could see Hazel while he made the call. Vance, the sheriff answered on the second ring. It's Nate Whitmore. We got a situation with Hazel. She had another reaction latex again. I'm at County Memorial with Dr. Rourke. Damn. Vance's voice sharpened. You think Brielle's responsible? I know she is. Got on video Declan surveillance, caught her contaminating Hazel's toothbrush with latex gloves this morning. Declan also intercepted texts between Brielle and her boyfriend talking about getting the girl out of the way and the insurance money. A long silence followed. That's enough for me to bring her in for questioning, Vance said finally. But Nate, you need to be prepared this is going to get ugly fast. I don't care. I just want Hazel safe. Understood. I'll send Deputy Mills to the hospital to take your statement and get the documentation from Dr. Rourke. Meanwhile, I'll locate Brielle. She should be at Southside Boutique. That's where she works. Nate wasn't sure what to believe anymore about Brielle's life. Sit tight with Hazel. Don't leave the hospital until my deputy arrives. Vance's tone was firm. And Nate, don't do anything stupid. Let the law handle this. Nate ended the call, his jaw tight. The law. The same law that had failed to catch Brielle years ago when she'd hurt her sister. But he'd play by the rules for now. Hazel's safety came first. Deputy Anna Mills was young, but professional. Her notebook open as Nate detailed the morning's events and the evidence they'd gathered. They sat in a small conference room adjacent to Hazel's hospital room, where a nurse was helping her with a puzzle. Sheriff Vance has officers looking for your wife now, Mills told him. Based on the evidence you've provided, we have enough for an arrest on charges of child endangerment, at minimum. What about attempted murder? Nate asked, his voice hard. She deliberately exposed Hazel to something she knew could kill her. Mills's expression remained carefully neutral. That's for the DA to determine once we have her in custody. The texts about the insurance policy certainly suggest premeditation. His phone buzzed with another text from Declan. Be not a house or boutique. Trying to track phone location, but she may have turned it off. Langley, also MIA from Jim. Nate showed the message to Deputy Mills, whose frown deepened. I'll update the sheriff. If they're both in the wind, that complicates things. She'll come here, Nate said with certainty. She'll want to know if Hazel's had another reaction. Mills nodded. I'll request additional security for this floor and station an officer outside Hazel's room. As Mills stepped out to make the call, Dr. Rourke entered, his expression grave. How's she holding up? He asked, nodding toward Hazel's room. Better. The rash is fading. Nate ran a hand over his face, exhaustion beginning to set in. What happens if they can't find Brielle? Legally, I mean. An arrest warrant will be issued. But in terms of Hazel's custody and protection, Dr. Rourke sat across from him. You should contact a family law attorney immediately. File for emergency sole custody based on the evidence and the ongoing investigation. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Nate stood, instinctively moving toward Hazel's room, when Sheriff Vance appeared in the doorway. We found Brielle, he said without preamble. She was at the gym with Langley. Both are in custody now. Relief coursed through Nate, quickly followed by a darker satisfaction. Did she say anything? Denied everything, of course. Said she had no idea how latex got on the toothbrush. Claimed the texts were being misinterpreted. Vance's expression suggested what he thought of those denials. Langley started trying to distance himself the moment we mentioned potential charges. He'll flip on her to save his own skin. What now? Nate asked. Now we build the case. The DA's reviewing the evidence, but with the video, medical documentation, and those texts, we have a solid foundation. Vance's eyes turned to Hazel's room. How's she doing? Better. They'll probably release her soon. Nate lowered his voice. I'm taking her to Declan's guest house. Safer than our place. Vance nodded approvingly. Smart move. I'll assign a patrol to check the area regularly, just as a precaution. Brielle will be held without bail, given the flight risk and danger to a minor, but it doesn't hurt to be careful. After Vance left, Nate returned to Hazel's side, watching as she meticulously arranged puzzle pieces. She looked up as he entered, her smile immediate and trusting. "Where's Mommy?" she asked innocently. "Is she coming to see me, too?" The question cut through Nate like a blade. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that her mother had deliberately made her sick? "Mommy's busy right now," he said carefully. "But guess what? You and I are going to have a special sleepover at Uncle Declan's house tonight. His place has a pool." As Hazel chattered about swimming and which books to bring, Nate's mind turned to practical matters. He needed to hire a lawyer, file for emergency custody, sort out what to tell Hazel's school. And beneath it all ran a current of cold fury, not just at what Brielle had done, but at how easily she'd maintained the facade of loving mother while plotting to kill their daughter. No judge would grant her custody. No jury would acquit her. But would that be enough? A prison sentence, however long, didn't feel like justice for what she'd done to Hazel, for the betrayal of the most sacred trust that in that moment. Watching Hazel's innocent happiness at the prospect of a sleepover, Nate decided legal justice would be only the beginning. He would dismantle Brielle's life piece by piece. Her reputation, her freedom, her future, all of it forfeit from the moment she'd first deliberately harmed their daughter. Deputy Mills escorted them to Nate's truck, then followed as they drove to the Whitmore home to collect Hazel's things. The house felt different now, tainted by knowledge of what had happened within its walls. Nate moved efficiently, packing Hazel's clothes, toys, and essentials while Mills kept Hazel entertained in the living room, in the master bedroom. Nate hesitated before opening Brielle's bedside drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of magazines, he found a small notebook. Flipping through it, his blood ran cold. Detailed notes on Hazel's allergic reactions dates, symptoms, substances used. A clinical record of abuse disguised as a concerned mother's observations that he slipped the notebook into his pocket. More evidence that, as they prepared to leave, Hazel asked to bring a photo of the three of them, Nate, Brielle, and herself taken at the beach last summer. The request twisted in Nate's chest. "How about this one instead?" he suggested, finding a picture of just Hazel and himself from her birthday. "But where's Mommy in that one?" Hazel's lower lip trembled slightly. "Tell you what," Nate said, crouching to her level. "Let's take both. We can decide which one to put up later." At Declan's guest house, a modern one-bedroom cottage behind his main residence, Nate settled Hazel, and while Declan pulled him aside to update him. "Brielle's lawyered up already," Declan reported. "Her uncle Calvin got her some hotshot defense attorney from Charleston." "Doesn't matter," Nate said flatly. "We have evidence. Solid evidence." "I know. Just be prepared for a fight." Declan glanced toward the door where Hazel was arranging her stuffed animals on the guest bed. "What are you going to tell her?" It was the question Nate had been dreading since this began. How did you shatter a child's world, even when necessary? As little as possible, for now, he decided. That Mommy did something wrong and has to go away for a while. Declan nodded slowly. "And the camping trip? The one she was planning? What about it?" "I've been thinking we still don't have concrete proof of what she intended to do on that trip. We have suggestive texts, yes, but her lawyer could argue those were misinterpreted." Nate saw where he was going. "You want to let her think the trip is still happening. Set a trap. With Hazel safely away, obviously," Declan clarified quickly. "But if we could get Brielle on record discussing her plans with Langley, it was ruthless, calculated, and exactly what Nate needed to ensure Brielle never threatened Hazel again. "Let me talk to Vance," he said. "If we can do this officially with his department involved, that's better for the case. And if he says no," Nate's expression hardened. "Then we do it anyway." In the guest bedroom, Hazel called for him, wanting help arranging her new sleeping area. As Nate helped her set up her stuffed animals just right, he felt a surge of fierce protectiveness. Half measures would be enough. No legal punishment sufficient. Brielle had violated the most sacred trust, and for that, Nate would ensure she paid the fullest possible price. The seeds of revenge, planted the moment he'd read Dr. Rourke's note, had taken root. Now they would grow into something Brielle would never see coming until it was too late. Sheriff Vance's office felt smaller with 5 people crowded inside. Nate sat beside his newly hired attorney, Patricia Donovan, a steely-eyed woman with a reputation for aggressive representation in family court. Across the desk, Vance was flanked by Deputy Mills and the district attorney, Martin Flores. "Let me get this straight," Flores said, tapping a pen against a legal pad. "You want us to release Brielle Whitmore on bail, knowing she's a flight risk and a danger to a minor, so you can catch her in a more serious crime?" "She's already planning it," Nate insisted. "The camping trip, the texts between her and Langley make it clear that's when she intended to kill my daughter." "Those texts are suggestive, but not explicit," Flores countered. "Defense could argue alternative interpretations. What we have now, the latex exposures, the medical evidence, the video, that's enough for serious charges. But not enough to guarantee she'll never get near Hazel again," Nate argued. "The most you can prove right now is child endangerment and possibly attempted murder. With her uncle's connections and money, she could get a reduced sentence, be out in a few years." Patricia Donovan cleared her throat. "My client's concern is valid. In similar cases, perpetrators have received sentences as short as 5 to 7 years, with possibility of parole. If Ms. Whitmore maintains her parental rights, she could petition for visitation or even partial custody upon release." The thought made Nate physically ill. "I won't risk that. Not ever." Vance leaned forward, fingers steepled. "What exactly are you proposing, Nate?" "Let her think the camping trip is still on. Have an undercover officer pose as the bail bondsman her uncle would hire. Release her with an ankle monitor, one that appears functional but that we control." "And Langley?" Mills asked. "Keep him in custody, but let her call him. Monitor the calls. She'll reveal more if she thinks she's getting away with it. If she thinks she can still carry out their plan." Flores shook his head. "Too many legal gray areas. Defense would cry entrapment." "Not if we don't suggest anything," Donovan countered. "If she initiates all discussions of her plans, if the actions and ideas are entirely hers, it's not entrapment." Vance sat back, considering. "I can't officially sanction this. Too many risks, too many ways it could backfire legally. However, if Brielle's uncle posts bail, which he likely will, we can't legally prevent her release as long as the judge approves it. What happens after that? Well, we can certainly maintain surveillance on a suspect in an ongoing investigation." Flores shot Vance a sharp look. "You're walking a very fine line, Sheriff." "I'm protecting a child," Vance replied evenly, "by whatever legal means necessary." 2 days later, Nate watched from Declan's security room as Brielle returned to their house, escorted by a man in an expensive suit, her Uncle Calvin, presumably. She wore an ankle monitor, her bail conditions stipulating no contact with Hazel and restricted movement. Declan had enhanced the existing surveillance system in the Whitmore home, ensuring every room except the bathrooms was now monitored. Sheriff Vance had officially distanced himself from the operation, but had assigned Deputy Mills to maintain case documentation, which gave them a direct line to law enforcement. "She's checking her phone," Declan noted, pointing to one of the monitors. First thing she did after her uncle left. Nate watched as Brielle scrolled through messages, her face expressionless. Then she made a call, putting it on speaker as she moved around the kitchen. "Ash, it's me," she said, her voice eerily normal. "I'm out at home. They've got this stupid monitor on me, but Calvin's lawyer says it's just procedure." "Bree, what the hell?" Langley's voice came through clearly, the jail call being recorded. "The cops are saying you tried to poison your kid, that I was helping you." "Don't be stupid," Brielle hissed. "They're recording these calls. Just shut up and listen. Calvin's working on getting you out next. The case is weak, just circumstantial stuff. They're trying to scare us. They've got texts, Bree. Our texts. About the money, about the camping trip, which prove nothing," Brielle said smoothly. "We can say it was about anything. Vacation plans after a divorce. Whatever. The point is, we stick to the story. I didn't do anything to Hazel. The latex was accidental exposure. The texts were misinterpreted. And the video they mentioned? Of you with the gloves." A flicker of uncertainty crossed Brielle's face. "What video?" Nate felt a grim satisfaction. She didn't know about the cameras. Didn't know how thoroughly she'd been observed. "They said they have video of you putting latex on the kid's toothbrush," Langley pressed. "That true?" Brielle's expression hardened. "They're bluffing. There weren't any cameras in our house. But it doesn't matter. They can't prove intent. Jesus, Bree. This is insane. I didn't sign up for. For what? She snapped. For $2 million? For a fresh start? That's exactly what you signed up for. And nothing's changed. Nothing. She lowered her voice. The camping reservation still stands. 2 weeks from now. Enough time for this to die down. For Nate to let his guard down. Nate's hands clenched into fists as he listened to his wife calmly discussing plans to murder their daughter. Beside him, Deputy Mills made notes, her face carefully professional despite the horror of what they were witnessing. I don't know, Langley said hesitantly. This feels too risky now. It's only risky if you lose your nerve, Brielle said coldly. Get out on bail, lay low, and be ready. Nate's predictable. He'll want to play nice for Hazel's sake. Shared custody, civil handoffs. All I need is 1 weekend with her. One opportunity. 9 days after her release, Brielle received a call that changed everything. Nate and the team watched as she answered her phone in the living room. Hello. Yes, this is she. Her expression shifted from annoyed to attentive. Dr. Matthews? Yes, of course I remember the appointment. Dr. Matthews was fictitious, a role played by a female officer working with Deputy Mills, calling from a number spoof to appear as coming from Charleston General Hospital. Yes, I'd like to confirm Hazel's registration, Brielle said smoothly. The camping trip is still planned for next weekend. I understand you have the previous test results. Yes, that's right. The latex allergy. Nate felt his chest tighten as Brielle casually discussed Hazel's medical history with a stranger, discussing it specifically in the context of the upcoming camping trip. And you'll have an EpiPen available? Good. Brielle smiled slightly. Yes, her father is aware of the arrangements. It's all been worked out in our temporary agreement. Another lie, another piece of evidence. After hanging up, Brielle immediately made another call, not to Langley this time, but to a number they hadn't seen before. She switched to speakerphone as she paced the living room. It's me, she said when someone answered. Everything's set for next weekend. The medical side is arranged. What about the boyfriend? A male voice, older, with the faint traces of a Georgia accent. He's still in custody? Yes, but it doesn't matter. I can handle this myself. Brielle, the voice warned, this has already gone sideways once. Your uncle's influence only stretches so far. If you're caught, I won't be, she snapped. The first attempt was too subtle, too easily attributed to accident. This will be definitive but still appear accidental. A tragic camping mishap. Hazel wanders off, falls into the water. By the time help arrives, she left the sentence unfinished, but her meaning was crystal clear. And Nate, the man asked, what about him? He suspects you. That's why you're in this mess. Brielle's laugh was cold and dismissive. Nate's a simpleton. Always has been. He believes what he wants to believe. Right now, he believes I'm a monster because someone told him so. If I play the heartbroken, wrongfully accused mother, eventually he'll doubt himself. He's predictable that way. The casual contempt in her voice made Nate's blood boil. 5 years of marriage, and she'd seen him as nothing but a means to an end, a provider, a caretaker for the child she now wanted dead. Just be careful, the man cautioned. And remember, if this fails, Calvin won't step in again. You'll be on your own. It won't fail, Brielle said with chilling confidence. 7 days from now, I'll be a grieving mother with $2 million in insurance money, and no one will be able to prove otherwise. When the call ended, Deputy Mills stood abruptly. I'm calling the DA. That's the evidence we needed. Explicit statement of intent to commit murder, acknowledgement of the previous attempt, discussion of the method. As Mills stepped out to contact the district attorney, Declan moved closer to Nate. I know that look, he said quietly. What are you planning? Nothing illegal, Nate assured him, though the qualification spoke volumes. But Brielle doesn't just deserve prison. She deserves to lose everything: her freedom, her reputation, her family support. Everything. Information, Nate said. About her uncle Calvin, about their family's business dealings, about the case in Georgia that was buried. I want it all exposed, not just what Brielle did to Hazel, but the whole corrupt system that protected her before and would have protected her again. I'll find it, Declan promised. "Whatever dirt exists, I'll dig it up." Despite the mountains of evidence and the new arrest warrant ready to be served, Sheriff Vance proposed a final Operation 1 that would leave no possible doubt about Brielle's intentions. The plan was simple but effective. Let Brielle believe the camping trip was proceeding as scheduled. Not with the real Hazel. Of course, a child officer from a neighboring county would be positioned at a distance, similar enough in appearance to create the illusion. Brielle would be under constant surveillance. Her actions and words recorded from the moment she left the house until the moment she was arrested. The morning of the supposed camping trip dawned clear and warm. Nate watched from the surveillance room as Brielle packed her SUV with camping gear, her movements unhurried and methodical. She'd spoken to her uncle twice that morning, assuring him everything was proceeding according to plan. "She's taking her time," Declan observed, "making sure everything looks normal." "Check the cooler again," Nate instructed, pointing to one of the monitors. "She put something in the bottom earlier." Declan rewound the footage, zooming in on Brielle's hands as she placed what looked like a small medical kit beneath the food and drinks in the cooler. "Can we enhance that?" Deputy Mills asked, leaning closer. "Working on it." Declan adjusted the settings, clearing the image enough to reveal the contents of the kit as Brielle had briefly opened it. Syringes, vials, latex gloves. "Christ," Mills breathed. "She's planning to inject her with something? Possibly epinephrine," Nate said grimly. "Too much of it can cause heart failure. And given Hazel's medical history, it would look like an allergic reaction gone wrong." At precisely 10 a.m., Brielle's phone rang. It was the call they'd arranged, an officer posing as Nate, informing her that he was dropping Hazel off at the arranged meeting point, a public park near the campground. "Great, we're all set then," Brielle said, her voice warm and pleasant. "I've got everything packed. Hazel's going to love this special time together." As Brielle pulled out of the driveway, Deputy Mills confirmed the tracking device on her vehicle was active. "All units in position. We'll maintain visual contact throughout." At the park where the handoff was supposed to occur, Brielle parked and waited, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. An unmarked police car pulled up nearby, and an officer carrying a small backpack got out with a little girl, the child officer, wearing a pink jacket similar to one Hazel owned and with her hair styled in pigtails. Brielle drove to the campground with her phantom passenger, maintaining a one-sided conversation as if Hazel were actually in the back seat. "We're going to have so much fun, sweetie," she said cheerfully, her words captured by the directional microphones in the surveillance vehicles. "I brought your favorite snacks and Mr. Flopsy Jr. Do you want to go hiking first or set up the tent?" At the campground, Brielle chose a site near the lake, relatively isolated from the few other weekend campers. The surveillance team maintained visual contact from concealed positions while Declan operated a drone that provided an aerial view of the entire area. For the next hour, Brielle went through the motions of a camping trip with a child setting up a small folding table, arranging snacks, even reading aloud from a children's book at one point, as though to an audience. To any casual observer, she was simply a mother enjoying quality time with her daughter, who might be inside the tent or exploring nearby. Then came the moment they'd been waiting for. Brielle glanced around, checking for witnesses, before retrieving the cooler from her SUV. She placed it on the picnic table and removed the medical kit hidden beneath the food. "All units stand by," Mills said in her radio. "Suspect is retrieving the medical materials." They watched as Brielle prepared a syringe, filling it from one of the vials. Her movements were practiced, confident this was not her first time handling such equipment. "That's not epinephrine," Nate said suddenly, recognizing the distinctive color of the liquid. "That's potassium chloride. It stops the heart almost instantly. They use it in lethal injections." Mills swore under her breath. "Where the hell would she get that?" "Her uncle," Nate said grimly. "He must have connections in medical supply." Brielle set the loaded syringe on a napkin and then did something unexpected. She took out her phone and set it up to record video. She positioned it carefully, angled toward the lake shoreline visible just beyond their campsite. "What's she doing?" Declan asked, adjusting the drone to get a better view. "Creating her alibi," Nate realized. "She's going to record herself calling for Hazel, searching for her." Make it look like Hazel wandered off toward the water while she was distracted. Brielle pressed record on her phone, then picked up the syringe and walked toward the shore, calling out in a normal voice. Hazel, sweetie, where are you? It's time for lunch. She continued the performance, her calls becoming gradually more concerned as she made a show of looking around the campsite. Then, with theatrical precision, she gasped and pointed toward the lake. Hazel, get away from the water, she shouted, loud enough for her phone to capture clearly. She began running toward the shore, syringe concealed in her palm. Move in now, Mills ordered into her radio. All units converge. Suspect is actively attempting to stage a homicide scene. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Sheriff Vance and 4 deputies emerged from concealed positions around the campsite, weapons drawn. 2 more officers approached from the shoreline. Brielle Whitmore. Vance called, "Drop what you're holding and put your hands in the air. Now." Brielle froze, the syringe still clutched in her hand, her expression shifting from fake concern to genuine shock. She glanced wildly around, looking for Hazel, finally comprehending that she'd been set up. "Where is she?" Brielle demanded, not dropping the syringe. "Where's my daughter?" "Safe from you," Vance replied steadily. "Drop the syringe, Brielle. It's over." For a moment, something dangerous flashed in Brielle's eyes, a cornered animal desperation. Then, in a smooth motion that no one anticipated, she jammed the syringe into her own thigh. "Officer down," Mills shouted into her radio. "Suspect has self-injected with potassium chloride. Get medical here now." The next few minutes were chaos as deputies rushed Brielle, knocking away the syringe before she could fully depress the plunger. Paramedics, staged nearby for the operation, sprinted to the scene with crash kits and a defibrillator. Nate watched in numb shock as they worked on Brielle, her body convulsing from the partial dose of the lethal chemical. He felt nothing, not satisfaction, not pity, not even anger anymore. Just a hollow emptiness where his feelings for this woman had once lived. "She's stabilizing," Mills reported after an agonizing wait. "They're transporting her to County Memorial under guard. Sheriff Vance is accompanying them." The preliminary hearing was set for 2 weeks after Brielle's arrest. Despite her apparent suicide attempt, medical evaluations had determined she was fit to stand trial, a small victory in what promised to be a lengthy legal battle. Nate sat in District Attorney Flores' office, reviewing the evidence one final time before it would be presented in court. The stack of folders on the desk represented months of Brielle's deception, carefully documented and organized. Medical records showing Hazel's emergent latex allergy, surveillance footage of Brielle deliberately exposing her to the allergen, text messages discussing the insurance policy and plans for the camping trip. "It's overwhelming," Flores admitted, gesturing to the evidence. "In 20 years, I've never seen a Munchausen by proxy case with this level of documentation. The surveillance operation at the campground alone would be enough for conviction." "But," Nate prompted, hearing the hesitation in the DA's voice. "But her uncle has hired Elliot Weber as lead defense counsel. Weber's known for turning straightforward cases into media circuses, finding technicalities, painting defendants as victims themselves." "Brielle is no victim," Nate said flatly. "I agree, but Weber will try to portray her as suffering from mental illness, possibly resulting from childhood trauma." Flores slid a file across the desk. "Your friend Declan found this records from Brielle's adolescence. Multiple hospitalizations for accidents that, in retrospect, appear suspiciously self-inflicted. They'll claim she was mentally ill all along." "Exactly. That she needs treatment, not punishment." Flores leaned forward. "We need to counter this narrative before it gains traction. Show that whatever her past, Brielle's actions toward Hazel were calculated, premeditated, and fully conscious." "How?" "We've subpoenaed her medical records from the last 5 years. If she's never sought psychiatric help, never been diagnosed with any disorder, it undermines the sudden mental illness defense." Flores hesitated. "There's something else. Something Weber doesn't know we have." He opened his laptop, pulling up a video file. This was recovered from Brielle's cloud storage. "We had a warrant for her electronic devices, but this was buried deep. The video showed Brielle sitting in what appeared to be a hotel room, speaking directly to the camera. The timestamp indicated it was recorded 6 months earlier. "If you're watching this," she began, her voice steady and clear, "something's gone wrong with the plan. This is my insurance policy proof that I'm of sound mind and acting with full awareness of my choices." Nate felt his blood run cold as Brielle continued. "Hazel Whitmore is not Nate's biological daughter. She's Asher Langley's child, conceived before I met Nate. He doesn't know he's always believed she's his. I've maintained that lie for 5 years, watching him dote on another man's child." The revelation hit Nate like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of the desk, struggling to process what he was hearing. "The plan is simple," Brielle continued on screen. "The insurance policy pays double for accidental death. 2 million becomes 4. Enough for Asher and me to disappear, start over somewhere new. No one gets hurt except Nate, who deserves it for being so pathetically blind all these years." Flores paused the video, studying Nate's reaction. "I'm sorry you had to learn this way. We only discovered it yesterday during the final evidence review." Nate's mind raced. Hazel, not his daughter? The child he'd raised from birth. The center of his world, a product of Brielle's affair with Langley? "It doesn't change anything," he said finally, his voice rough. "Hazel is my daughter in every way that matters. And this," he gestured to the frozen image of Brielle on the screen, "this proves she was fully aware of what she was doing. No mental illness defense can stand against her own words." "Exactly," Flores agreed. "But there's more." She goes on to detail the entire plan, how she'd been inducing Hazel's allergic reactions as test runs, documenting the dosages needed, planning the camping trip as the perfect opportunity for an accidental drowning. It's all there, in her own words, with no coercion or pressure. Flores resumed the video, and Brielle's cold voice filled the room once more. "I've been careful introducing latex, gradually building up a medical history of allergic reactions. The camping trip is the perfect scenario. Remote location, water nearby, a history of allergic episodes that could explain delayed medical response. Nate will be devastated, of course." Her lips curve in a smile devoid of warmth. "But he'll move on eventually. Men like him always do. There's one more thing you should know," Flores said, opening another file. "We ran the paternity test ourselves, using DNA samples from you, Hazel, and Langley." He slid a document across the desk. "Brielle was lying about that, too. Hazel is your biological daughter, Nate. 100%. The test results she planned to leave were falsified." Nate picked up the report, the scientific confirmation of what he'd never doubted in his heart. Relief washed through him, followed quickly by a renewed fury at Brielle's calculated cruelty. She'd planned to take his daughter from him twice over. First through death, then through a lie that would have poisoned his grief. "Weber doesn't know about any of this," Flores continued. "The video or the real paternity results. We're holding it for the preliminary hearing, maximum impact, when she's sitting right there in the courtroom." "Good," Nate said, his voice hard. "I want to see her face when it plays." The county courthouse buzzed with activity as Nate entered through a side door, guided by Patricia Donovan to avoid the cluster of reporters gathered at the main entrance. The preliminary hearing for State versus Whitmore had attracted media attention beyond what anyone had anticipated. Local stations, national networks, even crime bloggers had descended on Charleston for what was being called one of the most disturbing cases of Munchausen by proxy in recent history. At precisely 9 a.m., a side door opened, and Brielle was led in by 2 deputies. She wore a beige prison jumpsuit, her blonde hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, her face carefully composed in an expression of dignified suffering. Only when she spotted Nate did her mask slip momentarily, a flash of something cold and hateful crossing her features before she regained control. Beside her walked Elliot Weber, immaculate in an expensive suit, his silver hair perfectly styled, exuding the confident authority that had made him one of the most sought-after defense attorneys in the Southeast. The bailiff called the court to order as Judge Eleanor Hargrove entered, a stern-faced woman in her 60s known for running an efficient courtroom. "Preliminary hearing in the case of State versus Brielle Jensen Whitmore," she announced. Charges include attempted murder in the first degree, child endangerment, insurance fraud, and conspiracy to commit murder. She looked over her glasses at the attorneys. Mr. Flores, you may begin. For the next 2 hours, Flores methodically presented the state's evidence. Dr. Rourke's testimony about Hazel's allergic reactions and his prior knowledge of Brielle from Georgia, medical documentation showing latex in Hazel's bloodstream, surveillance footage of Brielle contaminating Hazel's toothbrush, and text messages between Brielle and Langley discussing the insurance policy and camping trip. Throughout, Brielle maintained her composure, occasionally whispering to Weber or making notes on a legal pad. To those who didn't know better, she appeared the picture of wrongful accusation, a concerned mother subjected to a terrible misunderstanding. That changed when Flores reached the final piece of evidence. Your Honor, the state would like to present Exhibit 17, a video recording recovered from the defendant's cloud storage pursuant to a valid search warrant. Weber rose immediately. Objection, Your Honor. As we argued in our motion, this video constitutes private communication protected under. Objection overruled, Mr. Weber. Judge Hargrove interrupted. We've already addressed this in chambers. The warrant specifically covered electronic communications, including cloud storage. The video is admissible. Flores nodded to a technician, and the courtroom lights dimmed slightly as a screen descended at the front of the room. The video began playing, Brielle's face filling the screen as she delivered her cold, calculating monologue about Hazel not being Nate's child, about the insurance policy, about her meticulous planning of what she called the perfect accident. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Even hardened reporters looked visibly shaken by the calm, methodical way Brielle discussed murdering her own child. But the most dramatic reaction came from Brielle herself. As her own voice described the plan drowning, her carefully constructed facade crumbled. Her face drained of color, her eyes widening in shock, then narrowing in fury as she realized the extent of her exposure. She turned to Weber, whispering frantically, but the defense attorney appeared equally blindsided, his usual confidence replaced by grim resignation as he recognized the devastating impact of the video. When the recording ended, the courtroom remained silent for several seconds, a heavy, stunned silence broken only when Flores spoke again. Your Honor, the defendant created this video as insurance against her co-conspirator, Asher Langley. It constitutes a full confession, made freely and without coercion, detailing not only her actions, but her motives and mental state. He paused, allowing the impact to settle. Additionally, the state has verified through DNA testing that, contrary to Ms. Whitmore's claims in the video, Hazel Whitmore is indeed the biological daughter of Nathan Whitmore. The defendant's claim was yet another calculated cruelty intended to maximize emotional damage. At this revelation, Brielle's composure shattered completely. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You don't understand, she shouted, her voice shrill. None of you understand. She was never supposed to exist. She trapped me in that life with him. She jabbed a finger toward Nate. Everything was ruined because of her. Ms. Whitmore. Judge Hargrove banged her gavel. Sit down immediately, or you will be removed from this courtroom. Weber placed a restraining hand on Brielle's arm, attempting to pull her back in her seat, but she shook him off. It wasn't supposed to be like this, she continued, her voice breaking. Asher and I had plans before she came along. Then suddenly I was stuck playing happy family in some middle-class nightmare while he built his business. He never even noticed when I started seeing Asher again. Never questioned anything. Just his precious Hazel. Always Hazel. Deputies moved forward as the judge continued to bang her gavel. But Brielle wasn't finished. You think I'm a monster? She laughed, a brittle, unhinged sound. Ask my uncle where the money for his real estate came from. Ask about the others, my cousin's baby who died of SIDS, my sister who accidentally drowned when she was 12. This is what we do. This is how we survive. She was still screaming as the deputies reached her, secured her arms, and began leading her from the courtroom. Her final words, hurled over her shoulder, struck the gathered crowd silent once more. She deserved to die, and I'd do it again if I could. 3 months after the preliminary hearing, Nate sat in another government office, this one belonging to family court Judge Martha Daniels. The walls were lined with law books and framed photographs of children's artwork, creating an atmosphere both official and somehow nurturing. "Mr. Whitmore," Judge Daniels said, reviewing the file before her, "I've examined all the documentation in your petition for termination of Brielle Whitmore's parental rights. The evidence is substantial and compelling." Nate nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. This meeting represented the final legal severance between Brielle and Hazel, a formal recognition that the maternal bond had been irreparably broken by Brielle's actions. Given the criminal charges, the documented abuse, and the recommendations from Child Protective Services and Dr. Lipton, Hazel's therapist, I see no reason to delay this decision. Judge Daniels signed the document before her with a flourish. "Brielle Whitmore's parental rights are hereby terminated, effective immediately. Full and sole custody is granted to you, Mr. Whitmore." Relief washed through Nate, releasing a tension he'd carried for months. "Thank you, Your Honor. There's one more matter," the judge continued. "The request to legally change Hazel's surname from Whitmore to your mother's maiden name, to provide additional separation from the publicity surrounding the case." "Yes," Nate confirmed. "Hazel's been through enough. Every time she hears her last name at school, it's a reminder. The change would give her a fresh start." Judge Daniels nodded understanding. "The request is reasonable and in the child's best interest. From today forward, she will legally be Hazel Montgomery." Outside the courthouse, Declan waited in his car, giving Nate a questioning look as he slid into the passenger seat. "It's done," Nate confirmed. "Full custody and the name change." Declan clasped his shoulder briefly. "That's great, man. One more piece of security for Hazel. And one more link to Brielle severed." Nate added, "How's the other situation progressing?" "Calvin Jensen's empire is crumbling," Declan reported as he pulled into traffic. The Georgia authorities reopened the investigation into Brielle's sister's death based on her courtroom outburst. That led them to dig into 3 other suspicious deaths in the extended family. The FBI's involved now, looking at money laundering through Jensen's real estate developments. Good. Nate felt a grim satisfaction at the news. The exposure of the Jensen family's crimes had become a separate crusade, one he pursued with single-minded determination alongside the primary goal of protecting Hazel. "There's something else," Declan said, his tone suggesting important news. Weber approached Flores about a plea deal. Brielle's offering to provide testimony against her uncle in exchange for a reduced sentence. Nate's jaw tightened. Flores better not take it. He won't. Not with the video confession and the evidence from the campground. He told Weber that Brielle can cooperate with the investigations into her family, but she'll still face the full charges for what she did to Hazel. "There's one more thing you should know," Declan continued. "Dr. Rourke called me this morning. His wife, Gwen, apparently knew Brielle years ago, before she moved to Charleston. I remember. He mentioned that when he first recognized her at the hospital. Well, Gwen's been going through old photos, trying to help the Georgia investigation. She found something unexpected." Declan pulled into a coffee shop parking lot and stopped the car, turning to face Nate directly. "Brielle had a younger sister who died, that much we knew. But according to Gwen, there was another sister, a middle child who survived." Nate frowned, confused. Brielle never mentioned another sister. That's because the girl was removed from the Jensen home after allegations of abuse right around the time the youngest sister drowned. She was placed in foster care, eventually adopted by a family in another state. Name changed, records sealed to protect her. Why is this relevant now? Nate asked, though something cold was forming in his gut. Declan hesitated. Because Gwen thinks, she thinks the sister might be in Charleston. Might have been here for years. Who? Nate demanded. Who does she think is Brielle's sister? Declan met his eyes directly. Dr. Rourke's nurse. The one who first noticed something odd about Hazel's symptoms and alerted him. Melissa Keene. The name hit Nate like a thunderbolt. Melissa, the quiet, efficient nurse who had been present during Hazel's first emergency room visit, who had gently suggested the latex allergy, who had seemed so supportive throughout their ordeal. That's not possible, Nate said, shaking his head. It's too convenient. Dr. Rourke thought so too at first, but he started looking into her background. Melissa moved to Charleston 6 years ago, right after completing nursing school in Ohio. Her employment records list her as an only child, parents deceased. But there's a gap in her history, a period in her teens that's suspiciously empty. You think she followed Brielle here? That she knew who Brielle was all along? It's a theory, Declan admitted. One that might explain why Dr. Rourke was so quick to recognize Brielle's behavior pattern, why he immediately suspected Munchausen by proxy. Perhaps Melissa had shared her suspicions with him, based on her own experiences with her sister. Spring arrived in Charleston with an explosion of azaleas and dogwoods. 6 months had passed since Brielle's trial, a 3-week legal proceeding that had captured national attention and ended with a verdict that surprised no one. Guilty on all counts. The judge had sentenced her to 30 years without possibility of parole, her uncle Calvin's influence having evaporated in the wake of his own arrest on money laundering charges. Nate sat on the front porch of their new home, a cup of coffee cooling beside him as he watched Hazel navigate her bicycle along the sidewalk. At 6, she was growing more confident by the day, her face screwed up in concentration as she steered around cracks in the concrete. "Look, Daddy, no hands," she called, lifting her arms briefly before quickly grabbing the handlebars again. "Careful, Pumpkin," he called back, smiling despite the momentary flutter of protective concern. Their new neighborhood was quiet, friendly but not intrusive, close enough to Hazel's new school that she could someday walk there on her own. The house itself was nothing special: 3 bedrooms, a small yard, a kitchen that needed updating, but it was theirs, unburdened by the memories that had tainted their previous home. The sound of a car approaching drew Nate's attention. A familiar SUV pulled into the driveway, Declan's vehicle, with Gwen Rourke in the passenger seat and Melissa in the back. They'd been meeting regularly as a small support group of sorts, bound together by their shared experience and their commitment to Hazel's well-being. "Uncle Deck," Hazel called, abandoning her bike on the lawn as she raced to meet them. "Hey, Squirt," Declan said, swinging her up for a quick hug. "Ready for the big picnic?" "Yes. I packed my kite and everything." Today marked a milestone, the first gathering of their expanded family at Hampton Park, a celebration of spring and new beginnings. Dr. Rourke would join them later, along with Sheriff Vance and his wife, and even Patricia Donovan, who had stayed in touch long after the legal proceedings concluded. In the months since their first meeting, Melissa had become a regular presence in Hazel's life, introduced initially as a nurse friend, then gradually as a more complex figure, someone connected to her mother's family, but in a way that represented strength rather than darkness. They were taking it slowly, building trust, allowing Hazel to process the connections at her own pace. They piled into 2 cars and headed toward Hampton Park. Along the drive, Hazel chattered about school, about the science project she was working on, about the friend's birthday party she'd attended the previous weekend. Normal 6-year-old concerns, untainted by the shadows of the past. The therapy had helped tremendously. Dr. Lipton, a child psychologist specializing in trauma, had guided Hazel through the confusion and hurt with gentle expertise. They'd established early on that Hazel would know age-appropriate truths, that her mother had done something very wrong and wouldn't be part of their lives anymore, that she had tried to make Hazel sick, but that none of it was Hazel's fault. More complex explanations would come later, when she was ready. For now, it was enough that she felt safe, loved, and free to be a child without the burden of adult betrayals. They could tee the park. They claimed a shady spot beneath a sprawling oak tree, spreading blankets on the new spring grass. Sheriff Vance and his wife arrived soon after, carrying folding chairs and a cooler of drinks. As the adults set up the picnic, Hazel convinced Declan to help her with the kite, the 2 of them moving to an open area of the park where the spring breeze might catch the colorful fabric. Nate watched them go, a lump forming in his throat at the simple joy of the moment. "She's thriving," Melissa said softly, coming to stand beside him. "You've done an amazing job, Nate." "We've done it," he corrected her. "All of us. This strange, wonderful family we've cobbled together." Melissa smiled, watching as Hazel's kite caught the wind, rising into the blue Charleston sky. The Jensens built their family on secrets and lies. But this, she gestured to the gathering around them, this is built on truth, on choice, on deciding who we want to be rather than being trapped by who we were. Nate nodded, understanding the depth behind her words. They'd both been shaped by Brielle's betrayal, but neither had been broken by it. And neither would Hazel be. As the afternoon progressed, clouds gathered on the horizon, promising a spring shower. They packed up unhurriedly, dividing leftovers and folding blankets with the ease of a group accustomed to working together. Back at home, after the others had departed with promises to gather again soon, Nate helped Hazel hang her damp kite in the garage to dry. The rain had caught them just as they reached the house, a brief downpour that had left them laughing and breathless as they dashed inside. "Did you have fun today?" he asked, helping her out of her rain jacket. "Uh-huh." Hazel nodded vigorously. "Uncle Deck says next time we could bring a Frisbee too. And Miss Melissa's going to teach me how to make those cookies myself." "Sounds like a plan," Nate agreed. "Go change into dry clothes, and we can watch a movie before dinner." As Hazel headed to her room, Nate moved to the kitchen window, watching raindrops pattern the glass while the sun, breaking through the departing clouds, transformed each drop into a prism of light. Brielle was gone from their lives, serving her sentence in a federal facility hundreds of miles away, her uncle's empire dismantled, her family's history of harm exposed and stopped. The legal battle had ended with justice, but the emotional journey continued a path of healing that wouldn't be completed in a day or a month or even year. Yet here they were, finding joy again, building something new from the ruins of betrayal, creating a family defined not by blood or obligation, but by choice and commitment and love. Hazel's voice called from the living room, asking for help selecting a movie. Nate turned from the window, leaving the rain and its memories behind. The future waited imperfect, uncertain, but full of possibility. And they would face it together, father and daughter, surrounded by the family they had chosen and that had chosen them in return. Outside, the storm passed, leaving the world washed clean, ready for whatever came next.